$16 a barrel. Stock markets in Japan and South Korea opened significantly down. Meanwhile, the Speaker of Iran's parliament has accused the U.S. of plotting a ground offensive, despite President Trump's talk of a potential deal. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf says his country's forces are ready to rain fire on any invading troops. All right, we're live in Amman, Jordan, Beirut, Kuwait City, Baghdad, and Tehran. But first, Teresa Bo reports from Washington, D.C.
On Sunday, President Donald Trump gave an interview and made some statements to reporters on Air Force One. There he said that the talks with Iran are going well, that there could be a deal soon. He also said that Iran had given the United States a present by allowing 20 vessels to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. But he also said that he did not discard to take or blockade what is known as Kharg Island, which he has referred to in the past as the jewel of the crown, mostly because it is from there that Iran exports around 90% of its oil. And this is happening just as the United States continues to deploy thousands of military forces to the Middle East. It's been confirmed by CENTCOM that the USS Tripoli, carrying around 3,000 sailors and Marines, has already arrived to the Middle East. Also, another unit from California, the Marines Expeditionary Unit, on the way to the Middle East. And the 82nd Airborne Division, a rapid response unit that can be deployed in around 24 hours anywhere in the world, is supposed to be arriving also to the region. So while all of this talks about the military deployments in the Middle East, this raises the issue of putting boots on the ground, something that is very unpopular here in the United States. It reminds many people here of the wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan, of these endless wars that Trump had promised he would not get involved in. So as these discussions are ongoing until now, what we know is that many are afraid of the consequences if the United States carries out a ground operation. However, the Washington Post today said that the Pentagon is getting ready for what it could be ground operations in Iran involving Kharg Islands and Iran's coastline, just as the U.S. president mentioned during his interview with the Financial Times. So as many here, especially Democrats, are afraid of the consequences of ground operations in Iran, Republicans are saying, and many of them are saying, that a military operations is necessary to finish this war. Teresa Bo, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, let's take a closer look at that statement from Iran's parliament speaker, accusing the U.S. of preparing for a ground invasion. Posting on X, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said the enemy openly sends messages of negotiation and dialogue while secretly plotting a ground attack, unaware that our men are waiting for the American soldiers to enter on the ground so they can rain fire upon them and punish their regional partners. We are aware of the enemy's weaknesses and clearly see the signs of fear and terror in the enemy's army. Well, let's cross live now to Mohammed Val, who's standing by for us in Tehran. Mohammed, Donald Trump says his preference is to take Iran's oil, and he left the door open to putting troops on Kharg Island. But there's also been this warning from Tehran regarding U.S. boots on the ground. What more are Iranian officials saying about all this?
So, Mohammed, Iranian officials seem to have come to the conclusion that whenever the American president talks about imminent peace, that means there is imminent war. War is already waging, but they are expecting an intensification of that war now that he's talking about being close to a deal and that the Iranians are reasonable and that the negotiation is going on. This is their understanding, actually, of the American mentality, particularly under Donald Trump. So that's why they are focusing more on that approach of a possible ground offensive than on what's happening in Islamabad. Most of the comments here are on preparations and that Iran is ready for a ground offensive, because that's what they think is going to happen, actually, instead of a peace deal in a matter of days, as Donald Trump seems to hint. That's why they have Baqir Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Parliament, wanted to really warn the Americans and remind them that putting boots on the ground means a protracted war, and that's the worst case scenario for President Trump, of course, with the mid-term elections approaching and with the unpopularity of this war already very noticeable, and the Congress has not yet approved it. So all of those factors are the Iranians are very much aware of, very well aware of these factors, and they also are saying that when the American troops invade Iran, that means the Iranians will be on a level ground with the Americans. They have hundreds of thousands of troops, they have hundreds of thousands of Basij, paramilitary, and they are prepared to defend their nation, which is going to mean more deaths among American soldiers and less popularity for this war, which is going to make the entire project of this war on Iran very detrimental to the presidency of President Bush and also to the enemies in general.
And Mohammed, I also want to ask you about these reports that a petrochemical plant has been targeted in Tabriz. What more can you tell us about that incident?
Yes, overnight that petrochemical plant was hit and partly damaged. There was panic among the population that it might leak some toxic waste and so on. But then the authorities have reassured the population that they are putting that fire out, and that's what they have confirmed. Just a while ago, they said the fire has been put out and there was no leakage that could harm the population. But it is a very dangerous escalation here, considered a very dangerous escalation here in Iran, considering that, just a few days ago, President Trump said there will be no strike on vital energy-related plants in the country. We have seen that happening yesterday when there was a power blackout around Tehran and also Karaj. It took hours and hours for the authorities in charge to restore electricity to those areas, which means that the President Trump has violated, him or the Israelis have violated that understanding between the two sides, and they are assessing the amount of that damage that's being inflicted to the power and power-related facilities and also other infrastructure, by the way, and promising to deal in kind and to retaliate against Israel and the Americans, and also even across the region, which is something that they say is underway. Yesterday, we have seen that strike on a chemical plant in Israel, and more has also been reported across the region yesterday when they struck some facilities in Bahrain and also in the United Arab Emirates. So the infrastructure in Iran is something that is considered here a red line, and whenever there is a strike on it, whether it is on energy or whether it is on any other type of infrastructure, the Iranians are threatening to do the same to inside Israel and also across the region.
All right, that's Al Jazeera's Mohammed Val live for us in Tehran. Thanks so much, Mohammed. Israel's military says it has intercepted 2 drones launched from Yemen over the southern port city of Eilat. Yemen's Houthis started attacking Israel on Saturday, opening a 3rd front in its war with Iran. Julie Dager explains.
After weeks of threats, Yemen's Houthis have entered the war, launching attacks against Israel in support of Iran. The group controls most of northwestern Yemen and the capital, Sana'a, and a significant portion of the coastline on the Red Sea, a vital corridor for global trade. The Houthis' involvement comes as Iran is maintaining its effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, where about 20% of global oil supplies transit. Now the Iran-backed group is threatening military action in the Red Sea if the waterway is used for, quote, hostile operations by the US and Israel against Iran. The corridor handles roughly 12 to 15% of global trade. The Houthis have proved they're able to strike targets far beyond Yemen. In 2022, they launched missile and drone attacks at Saudi Arabia and the UAE in response to their involvement in Yemen's civil war. One of the targets was Saudi Aramco's fuel storage facility in Jeddah. This is the aftermath of that attack. They also carried out significant attacks in the Red Sea in response to Israel's war on Gaza and in support of Palestinians. The group targeted commercial ships linked to Israel and even hijacked at least one vessel. The fear now is that if the Houthis make good on their threats, it could further disrupt the global economy and worsen the conflict.
Well, let's speak now to Rob McBride. He's following developments in Israel from the Jordanian capital, Amman. Rob, good to see you. As we mentioned a minute ago, Israel's military says it intercepted 2 drones launched from Yemen over the port city of Eilat. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, this interception took place in the very early hours of Monday morning here, local time. The authorities say they detected these 2 drones over that strategically important port city of Eilat down in the south. They say they took the drones down and then soon after ascertained and claimed that they had come from Yemen. Now, ever since the Houthis have entered this conflict a couple of days ago, an event that was marked not only by the launch of a ballistic missile, but very soon after another drone similar to this one over the city of Eilat. The military and especially air defences have known that they have now engaged on a third front, have been looking southwards to see what has been coming from Yemen. But all throughout Sunday and now through the nighttime hours into Monday morning here, they've also been engaged very heavily on both of those other fronts, especially in the north. As always, there have been sirens being sounded in northern towns and communities on the border with Lebanon as this war increases, with Israeli troops going in there and engaging with Hezbollah. Often those sirens followed by rocket fire coming across. And also we saw in the early hours of the morning 5 rockets being fired at the northern port city of Haifa. The authorities say all of those were intercepted. And then, of course, coming from the east is the ongoing missile threat from Iran. Throughout Sunday, the authorities say they dealt with a total of around a dozen incoming missiles. Most of them directed at the south, at the Negev, and particularly Beersheba, where we saw the most consequential and significant strike of the day. That was on the chemical plant that resulted in that fire and explosion, which has concerned authorities given the sensitivity of that area, and also the fact that so many other chemical plants are based there, and the potential that both sides, both Israel and Iran, could be escalating the scope of their targets to look at wider, broader infrastructure in both countries. Mohammed?
All right, that's Al Jazeera's Rob McBride reporting for us from the Jordanian capital, Amman. Thanks so much, Rob. And as Rob just mentioned, an Iranian attack on a chemical plant in southern Israel is raising fears that hazardous materials could be released into the atmosphere, forcing the evacuation of residents. Noor Audeh reports.
These thick plumes of smoke caused panic in southern Israel. An Iranian missile hit a chemical factory in the Niyot Hovav industrial zone near Beersheba, sparking fears of a leak of hazardous material. As firefighters battled the raging fire, residents were told to seal their windows and shelter indoors. The main highway to Beersheba was closed. The Niyot Hovav industrial zone has 19 chemical and pharmaceutical factories. It's also home to Israel's main hazardous waste disposal facility. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has said it will retaliate to Israel's strikes of Iranian factories and strategic assets by targeting Israeli locations of equivalent value. A threat that may explain why Beersheba, Dimona, and the Negev at large have been the focus of many Iranian strikes. Hours after the chemical plant strike, Israeli environmental authorities declare there is no leak of hazardous material. Threat averted for now. But the missiles keep coming, striking several locations in Beersheba again and injuring 13. With Israel vowing to decimate Iran's industrial capabilities, many fear dangerous incidents like this are likely to repeat. Noor Audeh, Al Jazeera.
Israel's parliament has passed the country's largest ever budget. That's after an emergency warning of Iranian missiles interrupted the debate. The alert sounded on phones across the chamber. Politicians were forced to take shelter in an underground bunker during the strikes. The $270 billion budget includes a massive $10 billion boost for defense spending. Gulf nations have come under continued attack by Iran. Kuwait says one Indian national has been killed in an attack on a power and water desalination plant. That's after 10 Kuwaiti troops were injured in another Iranian missile attack. Qatar has also said it's intercepted another drone launch from Tehran. And in Saudi Arabia, a cruise missile was destroyed before it could land. Well, let's speak now to Malik Traina, who's in Kuwait City, where there are reports of more attacks. Malik, what can you tell us about what's been happening there and around the Gulf?
Well, Mohammed, as you said, one Indian national, a worker at a electric power and water distillation plant, was killed. The government here releasing a statement a couple of hours ago saying that this plant was subjected to an attack by what they called a sinful Iranian aggression, resulting in the death of that worker and causing severe material damage. Across the Gulf, we've seen numerous attacks as well. You mentioned the 10 servicemen here who were injured. Over in the last couple of hours in the UAE, we heard about alarms sounding over Dubai. We saw a video circulating on social media showing interceptions of those attacks. And what we've now learned is these interceptions, the debris from these interceptions, can be dangerous and sometimes quite deadly. In Bahrain, numerous alarms were sounded. People there saying they heard several explosions. In Saudi Arabia, just in the last couple of hours, saying that they intercepted 5 ballistic missiles and 1 cruise missile in the eastern area. During that Air Force briefing from President Trump, he said that they have significantly degraded Iran's missile capabilities. But what we've seen on the ground here in the Gulf is we've seen an uptick of these missile attacks. Kuwait, yesterday, the Ministry of Defense saying that 14 missiles and 12 drones were detected in their airspace. The night before, I believe it was 17 ballistic missiles. The UAE, yesterday, their Ministry of Defense saying that 16 missiles were intercepted in their airspace. What we've seen from the Iranians is that they will retaliate in kind to any Israeli and American attacks there. We heard from our teams about the steel plants that were attacked in Iran. The next day, Bahrain, the Bahrain aluminum was damaged in an Iranian attack. Also in the UAE, the Emirates Global Aluminum facility was also targeted. Our team's saying that power plant was targeted. Here in Kuwait, we've seen a power plant targeted here. So, we're seeing thousands of American troops entering the region, the Houthis entering the conflict. All signals are pointing for escalation. For people here, that's not what they want to hear.
All right, that's Malik Traina, live for us from Kuwait City. Thanks so much, Malik. A drone attack has targeted the U.S. base Camp Victory in Baghdad. The base has been hit dozens of times by various Iran-backed armed groups since the war on Iran began. Earlier on Sunday, another drone was shot down near the main airport by the base. Let's speak now to Nicholas Hawk, who is in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Nick, can you just bring us up to speed with regard to any more details that have emerged about these latest attacks?
Well, Mohammed, earlier today or deep into the night, we heard the sound of loud explosions. It wasn't the sound of drones, but rather of rockets that targeted Victory Base, which is about 20 kilometers west of Baghdad behind me. Now, what we understand is that the air defense systems were not able to intercept those rockets, and it hit an A-32B Iraqi Special Forces transport plane that was set ablaze. Now, this is the first time that the U.S. Victory Base was hit inside the camp. Now, there are no American soldiers on the ground. The Americans have evacuated this military base, but it is significant. It's more of a symbol. At the height of the U.S. invasion of Iraq, that was probably the safest and the most secure area in Iraq, and yet now is coming under attack. We've heard throughout the night U.S. airplanes hovering above Baghdad. Meanwhile, in the Kurdish autonomous region of Erbil, there was another drone attack, an attempt to target the U.S. consulate there in Erbil, and the air defense system were able to intercept those drones. So we're seeing an escalation of attack, and in the night there was a statement from Awliya el-Dem, the Avengers of Blood, or the Guardian of Blood, which is an Iraq-based armed group that has close links to Tehran, claim responsibility for those attacks. Meanwhile, we've also heard from Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei in a written statement thanked the people of Iraq for their support in their war against the United States and Israel. And the foreign minister of Iraq, who also, in an interview with Al Jazeera, said that they're dealing with the flames of a war that is not their own here in Iraq. That's what he said. And they're both friends and trying to maintain relationship both with the United States and Iran. It is a tightrope for the government here in Baghdad on which they have to hold on. Mohammed?
All right, that's Al Jazeera's Nicholas Huck live for us in Baghdad. Thanks so much, Nick. Pakistan has announced it will soon host talks between the U.S. and Iran, although there's been no word from Tehran or Washington. It follows a meeting of Saudi, Turkish, and Egyptian foreign ministers in the Pakistani capital.
The foreign minister held a very detailed and in-depth discussion on the current regional situation. We also discussed the possible ways to bring an early and permanent end to the war in the region. The foreign ministers expressed concerns that the ongoing conflict is extremely unfortunate for its devastating impact on lives and livelihood across the wider region. We agreed that this war is not in favor of anyone and would only lead to death and destruction. The unity of Muslim Ummah in these challenging times is of utmost importance.
Osama bin Javed has more on the progress of those talks from Islamabad.
I was looking at the detailed speech of the foreign minister. The thing that stood out to me was essentially what he said in the end of that speech, where he says that Pakistan has the confidence of both Iran and the United States, and Pakistan will be happy to host these talks in the coming days. So it appears that the end note of all of these conversations has been a positive one, despite all that you've been seeing on the ground, the escalations that are happening. It appears that on the diplomatic front, there is some hope. But again, I mean, we were in Geneva just a couple of weeks ago. Remember that there was still hope that there could be a diplomatic off-ramp, but that did not happen. Iran still says that it has been attacked twice by the Americans and the Israelis when it went to negotiation. So there is a lot of confidence that needs to be built. But again, this is baby steps to bring those sides together. Maximalist demands stand on both sides, but what the role of these mediators is going to be is to try and bring them closer together.
Although neither were involved in those talks in Pakistan, both Iran and the U.S. have each outlined their conditions for ending the war. Tehran is demanding an end to what it calls aggression and targeted assassinations. It's also seeking guarantees against future attacks and reparations for war damages. Tehran is calling for an end to fighting on all fronts, including conflict involving its allied groups. And it wants its sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz recognized. While President Trump's 15-point list hasn't been published, U.S. media leaks suggest it includes Iran dismantling its nuclear facilities and promising to never develop nuclear weapons. The U.S. is also calling on Iran to limit the range and number of ballistic missiles it has, to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and to end its support for regional allies. Earlier, my colleague Sarah Khairat was joined by Ross Harris